The moment I walked into rehab at 15, I thought my life was over. I remember standing in that sterile hallway, clutching my duffel bag like it was the last piece of my old life, watching my parents drive away through the reinforced glass windows. The intake counselor was saying something about orientation and room assignments, but all I could think was how everyone at school would find out, how my college dreams were toast, how I'd gone from honor roll to complete failure in less than 6 months. The Adderall that started as study help for my AP classes had somehow turned me into this hollow shell of a person who couldn't function without pills. And now I was here, in what felt like prison for kids who couldn't get their act together. Those first few days were absolute hell, and I was furious at everyone who put me there. I'd wake up at 6 in the morning for mandatory breakfast, sit through group sessions where I refused to speak, and spend every free minute plotting how to convince my parents this was all a huge mistake. The counselors kept talking about healing and recovery, but all I heard was punishment. I'd been the perfect student my entire life, never missed curfew, never got in trouble, and suddenly I was being treated like some kind of criminal just because I needed help staying focused on my studies. The withdrawal symptoms made everything worse. I couldn't concentrate on anything. My body felt like it was crawling with ants, and I spent most nights staring at the ceiling wondering how long 30 days could possibly take. Every time someone mentioned addiction or drug abuse, I wanted to scream that they didn't understand, that this wasn't the same thing as kids smoking weed behind the school or drinking at parties. The other teens in my unit seemed just as angry and confused as I was, which somehow made me feel even more isolated. During those first group sessions, I'd sit in my plastic chair and judge everyone else's stories, thinking there was no way my situation was anything like theirs. There was Marcus, who'd been selling his mom's prescription painkillers to buy video games, and Sarah, who started drinking at 13 after her parents' divorce. Then there was Dylan, quiet kid with perfect grades who'd been cutting himself with razor blades hidden in his textbooks. I convinced myself I was different, that I didn't belong with these kids who had real problems, real trauma, real reasons to mess up their lives. My problem was academic pressure, not some deep emotional issue, and I just needed to get back to school and prove I could handle things on my own. But something started shifting during my second week, when we had this group session about stigma and shame. Sarah was talking about how she used to think kids in rehab were losers and dropouts, and then she laughed this bitter laugh and said she realized she'd become everything she used to judge. Marcus nodded and admitted he'd always pictured drug addicts as scary homeless people, not honor students or star athletes or kids from good families. When it was my turn to share, I found myself saying out loud for the first time that I'd been taking 60 milligrams of Adderall daily just to write essays and study for tests, that I'd been stealing pills from friends and buying them online when my fake symptoms stopped working with doctors. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, but nobody looked shocked or disgusted. Dylan just nodded and said he'd been popping his sister's anxiety medication before every test because he couldn't handle the pressure of maintaining his 4.0 GPA. That night, lying in my narrow bed listening to my roommate's breathing, something clicked for me about why I was really there. These weren't bad kids who'd made terrible choices out of rebellion or stupidity. We were all just teenagers who'd found chemicals that helped us cope with things we didn't know how to handle. Whether that was academic pressure, family problems, social anxiety, or just the overwhelming difficulty of being 15 in a world that expected us to have everything figured out. Marcus had been dealing with his parents' constant fighting. Sarah felt invisible after her little brother was born with special needs, and Dylan carried the weight of being the perfect son in a family where anything less than excellence meant disappointment. My need to excel academically had led me down the same path as their need to numb emotional pain. And that realization was both terrifying and oddly comforting. The real breakthrough came during an education session about how addiction actually affects teenage brains. Our counselor explained that adolescent brains are still developing, especially the parts responsible for decision-making and impulse control, which makes us more vulnerable to developing dependencies on substances that alter our brain chemistry. When I learned that stimulants like Adderall actually change the way your brain produces and processes dopamine, suddenly my experience made scientific sense instead of feeling like a personal moral failing. The reason I couldn't focus without pills wasn't because I was lazy or weak, but because my brain had essentially been rewired to expect artificial stimulation. Understanding that addiction was a medical condition, not a character flaw, lifted this crushing weight of shame I'd been carrying around. For the first time since starting treatment, I stopped seeing myself as a failure and started seeing myself as someone who needed help healing from an illness. Learning about my brain also helped me understand why all my previous attempts to quit cold turkey had failed so spectacularly. The counselors taught us about neuroplasticity and how teenage brains are actually incredibly good at forming new neural pathways, which meant recovery was possible, but required specific strategies designed for how young minds work. We practiced mindfulness techniques that seemed silly at first, but actually helped me notice when I was feeling overwhelmed before reaching crisis mode. They taught us about natural ways to boost dopamine through exercise, social connection, and accomplishing small goals, which gave me hope that I could feel motivated and focused again without chemicals. We learned breathing exercises for anxiety, journaling techniques for processing emotions, and how to identify our personal triggers and warning signs. The group therapy sessions became less intimidating once I started participating honestly, and I discovered that talking through my experiences with peers who understood what I was going through was incredibly healing. We'd share strategies for handling stress, celebrate small victories like sleeping through the night or eating a full meal, and call each other out when someone was making excuses or avoiding difficult emotions. Having Dylan understand exactly what I meant when I described the panic of facing a blank page without Adderall, or having Sarah relate to the guilt of disappointing parents who'd sacrificed so much for my education, made me feel less alone than I'd felt in months. These kids became my first real friends in years, people I could be completely honest with about my struggles without fear of judgment or rejection. Family therapy sessions were probably the hardest part of the entire program, even though they ended up being incredibly healing for all of us. My parents had been blaming themselves for not noticing my addiction sooner, wondering if their high expectations had pushed me toward needing pharmaceutical help to meet their standards. I had to explain that their love and support had never been conditional on my grades, but that I'd internalized so much pressure to succeed that failure felt like the end of the world. We talked about how my perfectionism had actually been a warning sign they didn't know to look for, how my straight A's and early admission to AP classes had masked the fact that I was drowning internally. My mom cried when she realized that all those late nights she thought I was being dedicated to my studies, I was actually staying up because I couldn't sleep after taking stimulants. Rebuilding trust with my parents took time, and lots of uncomfortable conversations about boundaries, expectations, and communication. They had to learn that asking about my recovery wasn't the same as checking up on whether I was using, and I had to learn that accepting help wasn't admitting weakness. We established new routines around homework and studying that prioritized my mental health over perfect grades, and my parents started therapy themselves to work through their own feelings about my addiction. The family sessions taught us how to talk about difficult topics without everyone getting defensive, how to express disappointment without blame, and how to celebrate progress without ignoring ongoing challenges. By the time I completed the program, we felt like a family again, instead of 3 people walking on eggshells around each other. Coming home after 30 days felt surreal, like returning to a place that looked familiar but felt completely different. School was challenging at first because I had to relearn how to study and focus without chemical assistance, and my grades definitely suffered while my brain readjusted to functioning naturally. But I discovered that I could still learn and succeed academically, just at a more sustainable pace and with better balance between work and rest. Some of my friendships changed because I couldn't relate to the pressure cooker mentality that had previously defined my social circle. But I formed deeper connections with people who valued more than just academic achievement. I started seeing a therapist regularly, joined the school's peer support group, and became more involved in activities that brought me genuine joy instead of just looking good on college applications. Recovery isn't a destination you reach and then stay at forever, and I'd be lying if I said every day has been easy since leaving treatment. There are still moments when I'm facing a difficult assignment or stressful situation where my brain suggests that just one pill would make everything manageable again. The difference is that now I have tools for recognizing those thoughts, reaching out for support, and finding healthier ways to cope with pressure and anxiety. I've learned to see setbacks and struggles as normal parts of life, rather than emergencies requiring chemical intervention. My relationship with my parents continues to grow stronger as we practice the communication skills we learned in family therapy, and I'm genuinely excited about my future in ways that don't depend on being perfect. Rehab didn't end my life at 15. It saved it and gave me the chance to discover who I actually am, underneath all that pressure and artificial stimulation. If you're watching this and struggling with similar issues, please know that getting help isn't giving up on your dreams or admitting you're broken. If this helped you, please share with someone that needs it. Do not forget to like and subscribe and turn on the notification icon for more topics on addiction. It's choosing to invest in becoming the healthiest, most authentic version of yourself, and that person is worth fighting for.